I've cut my XPS foam to different lengths, but the dimensions are about 20 mil for the height and for the depth as well. I use my little 132 scale guy here to get my measurements by just kind of eyeballing it waist height for him, and then that's how I figured that out. I'm just going to sand it down nice and gently, very, very gently, so I can just get it a little bit fluffy so it'll absorb the paint, and also just to neaten it up a little bit as well. I've got these all the lengths that I want them to be, and I'm just going to draw into them the impressions to make the detail with a really, really nice sharp pencil, which acts more like a cutting tool, but I can also see the lead, so it shows me where I've cut through with the pencil. Eyeballing that as well, just down the centre to make the join of the doors. The feather touch with that pencil, I don't want to cut too deep. And the handles, I'm just going to use a pencil as well to make an impression instead of putting a bead on, because it's fiddly and, you know, it's hard to get the right size. It's got to be small enough. I'll join them together later after they're all painted, but that's how they're going to fit together. I've got my little sink here that I made out of a blister pack from just some paracetamol. I used the top of the pencil just to shape the foam, and then I cut it out with a knife really, really roughly, and it just came out really easily. Just so I could slot the sink into it. That was extremely easy. I love the size of that sink too. It's so good. I've put a couple of holes into this. I'm going to put a stove top on that's going to have a fire on it, because it's The Sims. You can't have a stove without a fire. And yeah, I just used a pokey tool to put some holes into it. My little stove top, that's a bit of paper with plastic that I've glued the paper to the plastic. I've printed it out just to save me having to make detail. A little bit of, plastic for the flames. Very, very basic stuff. My fridge I've just sculpted the same way as the benches and drew in the pattern. It's a bit rough. I don't know if I'll hang on to this one. I might have to redo it. And that's all my pieces ready to paint. I just want to make sure that they fit nicely before I go doing that. You can see I've made a hole in the wall where I'm going to thread my lights through. There's a little top with a sink in it. I really do like that sink a lot. And just the top cupboards that go into the little L shape there. It's about as basic as it gets. But it's going to look nice. It's so small. Whoops. I'm going to drop them into a dirty wash of just watered down acrylic paint for a bath, because I want to get the paint into all the little details that I drew. That way I can skim across them later with paint, and I'll still have the joins of the doors and the detail on the back of the fridge and all that sort of stuff. I'll just leave them on this tray to get nice and dry before I go on putting paint on them. I've used some turquoise and a green. I just want to get that kind of Sims green. Anyone who's played The Sims would know the starter stuff. When you're a real povo sim and you get that green fridge and the green countertops and that sort of thing. That's the green I'm going for. Povo green. I'm just going to very lightly paint these. I did put a couple of coats of paint on. You can see my shonky sanding work there, but it's alright. I'll fill it in with a bit of paint. If I was really worried, I'd put a bit of polyfiller into it and smooth it out, but I don't care enough because it's so small, and it's meant to be simple, so I'll leave it as is. Just a nice tidy paint job. No brush strokes if possible. I like this green. And again, skimming across so I don't get into the grooves of the doors. If you do get any paint in the grooves, you can just go over it lightly with a pencil and just pull it back out. Nice and lightly over the coil on the back. I did the detail in this because I planned on having the back of the fridge facing outward on the diorama, but I'm undecided still. A little bit of, it's an olive green. It looks white, but it's certainly not white. It would be way too bright to put white on top of this. A couple of coats of this nice and tidily put on as well. You see my fingers, my pinky fingers, the tips are touching each other. When you're doing this kind of painting, if you anchor your pinky finger to something, you'll find that you can do really nice clean lines and not have to worry about wobbling everywhere and making mistakes. So that's just a little tip for anyone who doesn't know that. A pinky finger tip. Makes for quick, easy painting. A little bit on the inside there, which was unnecessary, but hey, stuck it in there anyway. And the little sink, I'm just going to put a bit of silver on. I did prime it with some black primer. Just lightly put this on. A bit of black on the back of the fridge. It's meant to be a bit of a recess in there with the cylinder. It's all an impression of what's going on, not really sculpting every little piece by hand. And I'm painting it in. I just got an image online for the back of a Sims fridge for this, so I'm not sure how accurate it is to a real fridge, but it'll do. That's my pieces all ready to start putting the stove and the sink in. I've got to put the little plug hole. I don't know what people call it in other countries. I always grew up calling it a plug hole. The drain hole. I'm going to put the drain hole in. Super easy stuff. And I'm going to put them all together. Before I go gluing them in, I've got to put my stove oven front on. It's another piece of plastic that I glued. It's the same as the stove top. I just glued a little printout onto a bit of plastic and cut it out. This kind of plastic that I use, you've got to make sure it's also not too brittle or you'll have issues cutting it. It's got to be a little bit flexible. I want to have that shine on the front of the oven. That's why I used the plastic. My little fire. It's just a tiny bit of orange cellophane that I jammed in the hole that I made on the stovetop. And I pop the sink in. I really like this sink. It's so tidy for something so basic. And the size is excellent too. Got to pop some taps yeah, I made these. You can see that I thought they were fantastic. The little bead on a pin, but you can see it's just too big. And I know the detail is great, but here's a big tip: if you make something, always make sure it's a little bit too small. If you can't make the right size, never make something too big. Even this tap that I made out of a bit of wire, it's just, I'm unsure. So be safe and make it too small. So I just used 3 pins and made the 2 little taps and the faucet. As you can see, that is much more tidy than those great big hulking things that would have looked crazy on there, no matter how beautifully detailed. If it's too big, it's wrong. I really like this. It's simple and it's neat. All ready to go into the Sims build. I'll chuck that away for another project. I'm just going to put the little lights in. It's one of those ones that usually have about a dozen lights on it, but I snipped it off because it was glued to something else, so I just chopped it, and luckily the little globes still work, and I'm sure the battery will last for 10 years. Now there's only 2 globes on there. I've just hot glued it up inside in a position where I could change the battery if I ever want to do that. And then I stick my little globe up inside the holes that I poked. And I'll glue this down like that. My little corner unit, I'll just pop it in first so everything's in the proper position. You can see that little splash back thing I've put there. It's just a bit of paper on some tissue box cardboard glued in. It's actually aiding as a nice guide of where to put everything, so it's all very tidy. And my long bench with a sink. The colours come out really nice. It's very sort of 1950s, I think, isn't it? Maybe 1950s. Retro. And my little microwave I made out of a bit of foam, and same as the stove top and the oven front, a bit of printout stuck onto a bit of plastic. I'll glue that down. Just a nice little bit of easy detail. Fills that corner too where there's the joins. I did not tend to do any of the joins in this build, so I will disguise them. Pop that there. It sits really nicely on that splashback that I put in previously. Might have to put some little details up on top of those cupboards too. Or maybe some vines or something. The fridge sitting there, I don't want to leave it there because I'm concerned if I leave it in that spot and I'm moving things around because it's a free floating diorama at the moment. When I'm picking it up, it may get broken. So I'll leave it on its own at this point. Got my little lights happening. I'll turn these lights out so you can see the brilliance of the fire. It's still, I mean, you'd have to turn the lights out to see it, but you know, we know it's there, so it's good. And I've got a little light in that room now too, which I will be tending to sometime in the future. I'll have to put a freaked out Sim standing there screaming at the fire before the Grim Reaper comes to get him. And my little fridge. I think I need to turn the light back on. And that's the kitchen all done. That took me only about 4 hours to throw it all together, though it did take me days of thinking about it. But it's a very quick little thing to do. But that's the gift of XPS foam. It's a fantastic thing. I hope you got something from this, because it's just a really nice little way to think about doing 1/32 scale builds, especially when you're doing, you know, interiors for buildings and that kind of thing. And yeah, this is a fun little thing to tackle. Well, I better get on with doing the bedroom and the bathroom and the rest of this house, and yeah, much to do. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I do hope to see you next time.